We start at Crockett's Corner, for those of you that remember where that was, and we're going to work our way up the main street until we get to the other end at the former Crescenties Market. And I know there's a lot of collective memory in this room, and we want to get as many comments on the record as possible from people's memories of these early businesses. So we're just going to meander our way along and receive all the comments that we can. And if we don't get all the way to Crescenties Market this year, we'll just leave off, and we'll just pick it up next year and go from wherever we leave off to Crescenties Market, aka Hannaford's. Okay, so the first place we're going to start, and Ben has given me a bit of a little sheet here to read some comments from that he's added, and we have photographs that we have been compiled. And I want to also thank our town archivist, Jim Perkins. I gave him this list and said, dude, whatever you got, just could you send me an email of whatever images you may have of these businesses, of these addresses, which he did. Sent a whole bunch of them. I emailed them to Ben. He put them in the slideshow. If you want to make a comment, and there's something that you remember about these businesses, by all means, stand up, whatever, recognize we. So this is kind of an historical recitation. Anything you remember about these businesses, if you moved here since they went out of business, this is a great opportunity if you catch up and see what New London was like in prior years before you may have moved here. So we're going to start out with Crockett's Corner. And Crockett's Corner was so named because of Dura Crockett's Dairy. And Dura Crockett's Dairy Farm was in that big colonial house across from what is now the Flying Goose Brew Pub. And he went down that hill. Yeah, go ahead, Ben, if you have something for us. Let's shoot. This is what it looks like today. So what happened is, as I understand it, and I haven't, these are our hymnals for tonight. If you have not obtained copies of these at bookstores or whatever, this is J. Dwayne Squire's History of America, New London, 1900 to 1950. And this is Ann Page Stecker, which is 1950 to, thank you, 2000. And these are two great resources. I didn't have a chance to research all these, but there's lots of photographs in each, which will augment our presentation. My understanding as a kid growing up here was that Dura Crockett had this dairy farm, and he farmed all those fields on Rowell Hill that are now growing houses, and ran a dairy farm. And he had so much surplus milk that they decided that, gee, maybe we should start an ice cream shop in the summer. So that's what this is. This was the original Gray House, and it was augmented and run in addition to Dura Crockett's Dairy Farm, and they sold ice cream there. And that's how it all got started, and the picturesque location is unbelievable. The view is phenomenal. I mean, and back then, there were no trees to obstruct the view. It was just incredible. So that's how it started, and then it morphed into a major restaurant, and now it's presently the brew pub. Does anybody remember anything else about that? God, it was a hellacious intersection, Crockett's Corner back then, with a winding turn. And finally the state, after there was a big flatbed truck that got hung up trying to make the turn. It came up Route 11 and tried to turn down 114 and bottomed out halfway down the trailer. It bottomed out, and all the traffic was stopped. And so shortly after that, the state redesigned that entire intersection and made it the way it is, the way we see it today. Yeah, there's a comment in the back there.
Michael, do you have a date on that photograph?
This one, Ben, I don't know.
No, not that one. You got a date?
Well, we don't have the image of the back side. Is Jim Perkins here by any chance? Yeah. Jim, do you have any idea?
I don't have a date for that. It's the earliest I could find because they did some additions to it after that. But,
Yeah.
That
was probably 42.
I got it.
Janice Wallace's would have been in the 40s.
1940s, according to Janice Wallace, who's right back here in the front row. Yeah, Janice, thank you very much. Yep. Yes.
I've got one that's not related. It's related to the corner there, and it relates to the Ice House, the Cosmopolitan, which was our second fire truck in town that Bill Kidder acquired on its way out of the town being sold. But anyway,
that's another story.
Long before that, there was a fire, I don't know where it was, but that intersection used to curve to the left, and there really wasn't a four-way intersection there. And then King Hill went out that way. Well, anyway, Jules Pellerin, who was down by Buckland Beach, one of the Pellerins, was on the fire department. He was headed to a call, and he got down, and that, well, that truck's right here right now. Well, he had to stand on the brakes real hard to try to get enough to get around the corner, get it slowed down enough. And the steering wheel came off. Well, we still have the truck here, so I guess the history is nobody got killed. But anyway, it's kind of interesting to think that we still got the truck. So.
He was obviously pulling on the handle and applying pressure on the brake, which is what we usually do by pushing against the back of the seat and putting on foot on the brake. But the way the brakes are on that, you had to pull on the steering wheel to get pressure on the brake pedal. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
Also, Jules Pellerin was about my size.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
A large man.
Yeah. Great one. Great story, Pete. Thank you. Peter Stanley.
There was also briefly a restaurant in there called the Santa Fe Opera House.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I couldn't remember.
Yeah, and then eventually, as tourism increased, and probably in the 50s, they formed the Grey House Restaurant. And then the rest, well, as we say, the rest is history. It used to be called the Grey Hole and other things, but we're not going to go there. It was a restaurant, and now it's the Brew Pub.
I can't believe no one's talking about the brownie sundaes.
About the recipe.
There's some Grey House menus on the
Yeah,
table there, and there's one from '74. And
This-
the Sunday, a brownie sundae was 50 cents in 1974. I
It-
remember when they went from 35 to 50 cents, and that was a long time before
Yeah.
74.
I think what Laurie's referring to is this table over here, where you will see early McKenna's menus and other menus. You're welcome to come and take a look at this after or an intermission or whenever we decide to take a break. Thank you, Laurie. That's great stuff. This is all good. This is all great memories.
Quick.
Shoot, Judy.
You know, I tend to get two, but I summered up here all my life since 1959, but working at the Grey House was my first summer job. And I loved working there so much that I would come and work on my day off. But what I did not like was and Hell's Angels came in there a few times, and I was so scared, you know, because they were kind of mean. But it's if people came in just before you were supposed to close and they wanted 10 brownie sundaes, hot fudge sundaes, and everything's melting all over the place. I mean, but it was the best place to work.
Very cool.
Really was.
Very cool.
And Jeremy, going back even more years, that was my mom's first job. I still have the recipes for the hot fudge sauce and the butterscotch sauce
No, I get it.
at the Grey House.
I get it.
My grandfather worked in the fields with the horses plowing, and Mr. Crockett used to consistently win the pulling contest down at the Hopkins Fair with those teams of horses that he used to plow the fields.
Yeah.
That would have been back in the 1940s.
Well, I worked
Oh,
there.
dang. I don't know if any of you collect these things, but I have in my office a Crockett's Dairy milk bottle. Yeah, that was a big dairy farm in the early years of New London, and I can remember Delbert Messer, because who lived down the road from Crockett's, and he worked for Dura as a young man, and when he was of the carousing years, he would come into the barn after having out carousing all night, and he'd be confronted by Dura Crockett, who had little sympathy for him at that point. He wanted a day's work out of the man, and that's what he was going to get. You know, it was great. Anyway, all right, so we're going to move on from there to Drake's Antique Shop, which was, this barn was originally right up against the main street, what's now the main street, right directly across from that beautiful colonial house where I remember Al Tunis living, who was the town historian for years. And then somehow, subsequently, I don't know the details, I haven't done the deed research, but some subsequent owner arranged to have this barn picked up and moved set back from the main street. It was just like threading the needle going down through there on a winter's day with an icy road. You were either going to hit the barn or that section of granite wall that had been put up on the opposite side of the road. All that's been alleviated now because the barn has been lifted up and set back, and Priscilla Drake ran an antique shop out of this barn for years and years. And behind that, of course, was Dr. Bill Clough and his wife. They had horses that they raised and bred. I can't remember what kind of horses they were now. Connemara ponies, that's right. And Mary Baxter Foley, God rest her soul, she told me one time that she
This
had
is where Dr. Bill summered his sheep, because he raised Dorset sheep.
oh,
Summered them down in this pasture.
that you're talking about
Up on me.
old Dr. Bill, not young,
I
not,
mean Dr. Bill.
Okay.
Our doctor.
yes, yeah, the one who delivered me. Right, got it, okay. We're all on the same page here. Okay, so,
The horses were on Main Street. That was Louise's thing.
right, and so in any event, Mary Baxter Foley, rest her soul, bred this thoroughbred mare to a Connemara stud, and in Mary's words, we got the worst of both. Long years. I mean, Mary, God, she was great. Anyway, so her place would have been across the Red House, would have been across the street from that. Okay, and believe it or not, I remember as a kid, right about, and I brought my pointers in my bag, but right about starting in here and sweeping this way and back was this white motel. I don't know how many rooms it had in it, but it was called the Sundart Motel, College Inn and Sundart Motel. Yep, right across from Congressman Cleveland's house. And the story that I got, I don't know the details, but apparently that was somewhat not to their liking, given the fact that it obstructed their view and sunsets to the west. And through some series of events, which I'm not privy to, it disappeared one day. I don't know how that happened. I don't know if it's documented in here or not, but it just disappeared.
Michael?
Yes.
That was also one of Jane Tracy's first houses in New London.
Really?
Yeah.
Her second house.
Jane Tracy of Tracy Library.
Now, yeah, and the Tracys, if I may say so, I believe the Tracys came from Oberlin, Ohio. Cleveland, which is near Oberlin. I do remember that because my aunt, that would be my father's sister, went to college at Oberlin in 1936, I believe it was. And during the time, Mrs. Tracy would come to New London in the summer, and she lived at their Summer Tracy farm over there. My aunt was about 16 or 17 years old then. She'd go and be Mrs. Tracy's personal secretary during the summer. So Alice would go over there and used to work with Mrs. Tracy. Well, when Alice went to Oberlin, I remember her telling me this, she said Mrs. Tracy showed up one day in her limousine with her chauffeur, and Alice said she wanted to take me into the city for the theater, dinner in a theater and a show. And Alice said, well, we had botany class that day, and we'd been out in the forest digging things up, and she said I was filthy and I had nothing to wear. And she said, I know Mrs. Tracy would have taken me right into the city to a dress shop and would have bought me some clothes, and we would have gone to dinner and gone to the theater. She said, but I just couldn't impose upon her and ask her to do that, so I declined her offer. So she never went for Mrs. Tracy, but I thought that was very generous of Mrs. Tracy to do that. That apparently Mrs. Tracy was a very generous woman. Given what she did for the town of New London, I can only imagine what she did for the folks in Cleveland. But it was a fascinating, touching story from my Aunt Alice, and I do appreciate that. And I didn't realize that was her second residence. Any other comment about that?
The middle building there was the College Inn. And the side ones.
Right, it was expanded. It was expanded out there, yeah, exactly.
And behind the College Inn, where those rock walls were, there was an in-ground swimming pool.
Oh, very cool.
All those motel rooms, there were a lot of good parties there.
Oh, this is great. This is all good stuff.
So, if any of you know Click Morning, he grew up there for quite a few years with his dad and mom, right? Yeah. And his sister Connie. And he had the largest electric train collection up in that hip roof of that. And I was quite jealous, but he let us play with it. Ben and I used to go over there.
Oh, this is great.
I'd like to comment on that because Clint is now my neighbor and he still has all his trains.
He does.
We've seen it all.
And after that, there was a doctor, Dr. Warrenstein, that lived there and had the
I'm sorry, Hilda. Is that you, Hilda? It is, isn't it?
And Dr. Mark.
I look at this and I think this should have survived as a really good business, being that close to the college, you know, for lodging. Don't really know why it's
It's a mystery to me. It's a mystery to me. Okay, so this is the site of the Cranehurst. The Cranehurst was a wood frame boarding house that was run by not the descendants of, but the parents and the ancestors of the Lyons family who lived on Bunker Road. Roland Lyons and Billy Lyons, and I think his predecessors owned and ran that for years. And it was a boarding house right on the main street. Beautiful old place, wraparound porch. And what I remember about this place is two things. First of all, in a fierce blizzard, oh my Lord, I can't even tell you what year it is, but I know it's chronicled in here. They may not have all the details, but the town of New London had this massive tracked wing plow. It had a V plow on the front, and it had tracks, and it had like two sets of these great big wings and a big glassed-in cab. And when it really snowed a lot, and I have pictures of this in our archives, I got to get them to you, Jim. I've got to find them first. They're plowing that thing over on the King Hill Road. They could get one, if you made one pass down the street with this rig, you could get one car through. And during a horrible blizzard up in front of the Cranehurst, the operator of the vehicle accidentally backed over and killed a man, another employee of the town crew. And I can't remember the names of that, but it was a very tragic accident. I don't remember if Henry Stanley was the driver of the thing or not, but the victim was related to Charlie Whittemore. Yeah, okay, thank you for that, Jim. I couldn't remember all the details, and I should have done a little more research, but it was a very tragic accident, and everyone felt horrible about it. The other story that I remember about the Cranehurst, aside from the fact that the college bought it and then turned it into a pub right on the edge of the campus, which didn't really thrill a lot of the townspeople, but anyway, before that, back in 1930, I think I went and ate there and had a beer. I don't deny that. Anyway.
Run by John Donnery, who's married to Ann Johnstone and Gary Roy.
Thank you.
To go over in our pajamas. And get
Pajamas. Love it. So, that when you lived on the main street, I hope.
No, I lived in a dorm.
Oh, okay. Oh, got it. Okay. So the other story I remember, I got to go back. It's in the 1930s, late 1930s, early 40s. And Bob McMichael, who came here as an orphan, he was raised by the Pellerins down on the shores of Little Lake Sunapee in the Pellerin house. That's where he grew up. And he told me the story on tape one time in his house. He and Charlie Whittemore were telling stories, and I had my tape recorder going. I remember him telling me this. He'd been emancipated. I mean, he wasn't living with the Pellerins anymore. He was on his own. He's probably 16, 17, maybe 18. And he was boarding out. That's what you did. If you didn't have a place to live, you went to a boarding house and you got your meals and you place to stay. And he was working for Charles Shepard, who owned Shepard Stable up in the middle of town. The Shepard brothers were quite the entrepreneurs. They ran the stagecoach that went back and forth from New London to Potter Place. And the Shepard he was working for, whose name I had a moment ago and is gone now, I think it's Charles Shepard, was not a tall man. He was a short man, but he has full of energy. And Bob told me they were all in there around the dining room. They're having their breakfast, and Charles come in there 10 below zero. It was in the middle of January sometime, 10, 15 below zero, and the wind blowing like hell. And he came in there with his greatcoat on, and he was talking to his crew about what they were going to do that day. And I want you boys to go down to Little Lake Sunapee and cut ice. And somebody piped up and said, well, geez, Mr. Shepard, it's 10 below zero, and the wind blowing. And Charles just stood there and said, well, boys, you won't stand around today. You'll be working. You'll be moving all day long. You won't stand around today. And he said, Bob said, part of the deal was if you boarded out, you got a sandwich for lunch. And they gave it to you, wrapped it up, you put it in your pocket, and you went on about your business for the day. Well, he went around down there and started cutting ice, and he said, you get your lunch break at noon, and you sit in this little shed, and you pull out this sandwich out of your pocket, it's frozen solid. I mean, that's the 1930s. That's just after the Depression, and times were tough. And Bob remembered that, told me that story, and I've thought about it from time to time. And yeah, we're lucky. A lot of us here are really lucky. We haven't had quite that kind of hardship, but it's worth remembering from time to time.
Where'd that ice go?
This is the Shepherd Ice House right here.
This is the Shepherd's Ice House. That's exactly right, Pete. But back then, as I understand it, back then they cut the ice out of a bog, which is behind this area now, which has now, due to normal eutrophication, has silted in, which is what happens to all water bodies after a while. It's constant process. So now there's no place to cut ice. And that could have happened in the meantime, which is why they had to go down to Little Sunapee to cut ice. But anyway, that's where that story came from. So that was a boarding house, and the college bought it, and then eventually they had the Alumni Association in there for a while, and then the building was just kind of bad. It was kind of sick. They had some, I guess they had some mold and stuff in there. I mean, it was a building that had been built in the 30s or maybe before, and they tried to renovate it, but in order to keep up with things and keep it healthy, the college eventually had no choice but demolish it, and so that's what they did. And I saw the fire sitting in my hot tub looking over at the town of New London, and here's this huge plume. It was like, well, there goes the Cranehurst. Anyway, we are on to Colby Junior College for Women, 1928, which started out as the Colby Academy, unless I'm mistaken. I have the centennial history of the college at my house, and I yet to read it, but I do remember what people told me. But this started out as the Colby Academy, and then these Georgian colonial buildings were built in this campus, and my mother graduated there in 1944. Anybody show of hands? Any parents or relatives graduated from Colby Story College? Yeah, we got a bunch here. Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, and of course, huh?
My better half did.
There you go. There you go. And now, when my father was growing up, he was born in 1916, they didn't have a high school in London. He had to go to Proctor Academy. But I know his sister went to Colby Academy. And at that time, I keep going back to Aunt Alice. Well, she's my window to the past. They lived over where you all see the sign that says Todd Farm now. The big white farm at the top of the rise there was the Todd homestead. And Rinkman bought the outlying land and developed it and called it the Todd Farm. But all that land on that side of the road was the Todd, part of the original Todd homestead. The land on the other side of the road was the Messers, Jim Messer, Joey Messer, Peter Messer, all that. And that's the reason they owned that half of the road, that land over there, is because when my grandfather's sister married Elmer Messer, when, oh God, her name will come to me in a minute, married Elmer Messer, that half of the road was her dower. So the Messers inherited all that from by virtue of the fact that Elmer Messer married Gusty May, my grandfather Fred's sister. That's how they got all that land. So that's just how all that stuff works out, you know. And so the only thing that's left now is the Todd homestead and a small parcel of land, and then you have those other parcels. And of course, all the Messers are gone except for Amy, Kate, and Billy, and Jake Messer, who's a descendant, who's running a yard care business. But all the others, kids, none of them live around here. And for years and years, they were the Messers were one of the few still operating dairy farms in the town. And he had a rolling herd average of 25,000 pounds. And the only thing about dairy production, that's not too shabby. Yeah, it's a good stick. So anyway,
Some people might not know that for a while it was called Colby College, New Hampshire.
correct.
And
It was called Colby College for Women, and they didn't like that. Colby didn't, and they. And then it was Colby College, New Hampshire.
And Colby, Maine sued.
They didn't like that, they sued them, and then it became Colby Sawyer.
Colby, Maine sued for, copyright law.
That
And
was between 74 and 76, because I was only there 2 years, and I worked in the alumni office mailing out letters to all the alumni every time they changed the name.
Jesus, too funny, too funny.
we've got the sign over here on the building that Bud Morrison did, and it's Colby College, New Hampshire, is that what it says?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to connect the dots here that I started in and got waylaid with the Messers and all that other stuff. The point being that when my Aunt Alice went to school, she lived over at the Todd Homestead, but the school was over on the main street. Well, there weren't any buses back then. I mean, she was born 4 or 5 years before. She was born in 1911, 1912. So at that time, there wasn't any real roads, and in the wintertime, it was impossible to get her back and forth to school. You just didn't go pick up your kid at school with your Sue back then. So she boarded out in the Burpee homestead, which was where you grew up, where Ben grew up. The Burpee girls. Some of them never married. Anyway, the Burpee homestead. And so Alice boarded out there, and then she could walk back and forth, or she could get to school during the week. And of course, the Burpee homestead is a beautiful representative of colonial architecture, still in town. It's not been disturbed or modified in any great way. But
And was slated to be torn down before we bought it.
ah, God, thank God they didn't. Really beautiful, beautiful building. Okay, so where are we now?
It's on your sheet.
Oh, College Inn, Cranehurst. Now wait a minute. You know, I Foster's Fine Jewelry. Barb Teach Candy, etc. Menagerie Gift Shop. So this structure has had some iterations.
It was a knit shop, too.
And it was I think after this, it was a knit shop as well. Correct.
And a florist.
Calico Cat Antiques, Knit New London. Bingo. Yep, you got it. And that would have been after my mother went out of business, I think.
The Candy Etc. was in the building to the right of it. This was knit and Calico Cat Antiques, Nancy Spencer. At one time, New London had quite a few antique shops.
That was originally a blacksmith shop, as far as I remember.
Originally a blacksmith shop. Wow.
Way back when that was farmhouse.
Oh, yeah, the old Village Studio. The Marigans. The Marigans ran the Village Studio, and they lived down back, didn't they? Yep. And that, Candy, etc., and the Village Studio, and now it's a consignment shop.
And we lived above the
Oh, yeah, Robin sitting in the front row here. She said she and her mom rented the place above that.
Yeah, the apartment building. This was
Danny. Marigans. It was Marigans. The Marigan family. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, Paul Marigan, he's a piece of work. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, he knew his clientele, and he was trying to, yeah.
Back there was back from Art Supplies, and also that's where the Council on Aging started in the downstairs back of that building. They donated.
Right. And Backroom Art Supplies was Walt Rainey and his son. God rest their souls. They're both gone now, yes? Yeah. Yeah, after Robin and her mother moved out.
Yeah.
That was after George Graves died, because George Graves was my neighbor, and when I was a kid, he was in his 90s, and Robin and her brother and Marietta wasn't around, and her mom, single family. I mean, they lived there and took care of old George Graves, and there's a whole slew of stories there, but we're not going to go there.
lots of stories.
Yeah, that's just too close to the bone. We're not going there. Okay, so what do we have? Oh, this is Little Brother Hamburgers. But prior to that, it was the Crossroads of Sports. Now,
Karen Johnston's son ran a great little restaurant bar in there.
Hole in the fence.
No, that was.
no. Was that after the Crossroads?
420 Main, I think.
Yeah.
but there was a great photographer.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez, wait a minute. Hold it. Sookie Coughlin had an office.
No, that wasn't there.
It was in the Village Studio building. No, it was somewhere there.
Further down.
It was in the basement of the old post office, yes, but before that, she was up on the main street. Yeah, I remember. I used to go in there all the time, look at all the photos and talk to Paula, and I'm pretty sure it was the... Anybody, come on, help me here. Am I the only?
Hey, Mike,
Yeah,
Danny's trying to.
sorry.
That was Fred Giddings' place,
It was.
and then Doug Matheson took it.
Yes, Doug Matheson took it over.
I had a studio down in the back, with my doctor and everything else, and that was 72.
Yeah?
And the UBI office in New Hampshire, oversight, was out of that basement of that building.
Oh, I'll be darned. Wow, that's cool. And so, sure enough, I signed up for the Peace Corps and ended up in Costa Rica, and I was down there sitting in this little, whatever they, Bordello or Bordego, whatever the hell they call those places where you got all the fresh fruit drinks. And somebody had an old Time magazine. So I pick up this Time magazine, and I'm looking through, and I'm reading the letters to the editor. Doug Matheson's wife wrote a letter to the editor in Time magazine, and it got published. I can't remember what it was about now, but it was like, wow. Jeez. That was pretty cool. Yeah, anyway.
Also Gourmet Gardens.
Right. Lots of iterations. Okay, now we get to Dr. Pella Windows and Doors, Dr. Bazone Chiropractic. Well, we all remember what that used to be before, bingo, the College Sports Shop. That was Jen Miller and Mary Barrett ran that place. And Jen worked in the alumni office, gave my mother a job when she graduated from Colby in 1944. And that's part of the reason my mother stayed here is because of Jen and the connection to the alumni office and that. And Jen and Mary had this thing. And they, that was back when college blazers were a big thing.
Yeah, they sold them.
And they sold them. That's the only place you could buy them. Yeah, oh no, you had to get your blazer. I still have my mother's. I don't know what to do with it. But anyway, and so the College Sports Shop, they were pretty well dialed in. And Mary and Jen, they had an eye for fashion, and they kind of knew what women that went to Colby Sawyer should wear, and they made sure they had plenty of it. And then they got into the ski business. They sold a few skis and stuff, and everything. But yeah, Jen and Mary ran a very successful business there for years.
Mike, before you change,
Yep.
I hate to keep talking, but brings back memories. They did get in the ski business, and they tried to get my dad from the old roadkill at the
Right.
time to come in during parents' weekend so they could sell skis, and he fit the new skis with the binding.
Right.
But they ended up getting penny for two there in the Olympics.
Yep.
And I remember, I think Ben and myself and all that, and she was probably 18 at the time, and we were probably 12. Boy, it sure was fun to meet her. The only one.
Well, us girls liked it because Egon Zimmerman, her husband, who was also an Olympic skier, would come, and we girls like to go see Egon.
Yeah, speaking of which, when I was probably 14 or so, Hank Kidder was coaching the college girls ski team. And I was kind of interested in racing and stuff. And so Hank said, well, why don't you come along with us? We're going to go up to, someplace that way. I don't know, we're by Laconia. I can't remember the name of that ski.
Gunstock.
Yeah, Gunstock. We're going to Gunstock for a race, for a meet. Why don't you come along with us? So you can be my assistant coach for the day or whatever, carry skis and stuff. And I thought that was great. So I got over there. And Agorn was over there, and he was going to forerun the course. Okay? And so all the kids back then, what you did is you started at the bottom, and you sidestepped up the whole course, looking at all the gates and all the angles and trying to memorize in your mind how you were going to approach each and every gate. So these kids are all working their way up the mountain, getting up to the starting line at the top. And there's this one girl who had stopped in her ascent, sidestepping, and she stopped in the middle of this gate, and she bent over to tighten up her boot. And Agorn at the top had suddenly decided that it was time to forerun the course. So down he comes. And there was a little swale, and it went up onto this rise, and then pitched off down. And this gate where this girl was right on top of the rise. Agorn comes flying down there, and here's this girl right in the middle of the gate. He just tucked his legs right up and jumped right over this kid and landed and the kid looked up and realized she had just been jumped over by this guy, Zimmerman. And I remember, I saw this whole thing, and I went over and I looked at the tracks in the snow where this guy had gone. And all I saw was two perfectly carved right angle things, no slippage, Nothing. Just two right angles in the snow. Poof. Yeah, that's a level I never got to. But anyway, that's a great story.
So the college sports shops did not very often run any sales, but they did one day, and this person was in a hell of a rush to get there.
Apparently.
Told it was Priscilla Oler.
Oh, great stuff.
And I believe Johnny Oler's CPW.
Okay, we have a presently unoccupied structure, and who, by all means, who was the one who originally ran this? What do you guys remember about this place? Rexall Pharmacy. The Lovelies. Bob and Eleanor Lovely and their son. Their son with the flat top crew cut. Yes. Yep, they ran that for years, and of course the upstairs was rental property, and then to the left was the toy department, and they had a fishing gear. Yeah.
Fishing on one side, toys on the other,
Yeah.
And Mr. Lovely, as I was growing up, and my mom was good friends of theirs, and she'd go in for coffee and to catch up on what was happening in town. And Mr. Lovely, from the time I was 3 until probably about 9 or 10, on my birthday, would say, "Come with me," and we go back in the toy area, and he let me pick out a toy. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And of course, one year, I don't know, I think I was like 7 or 8, I decided that, I had my eye on this nice bouncy beach ball that was in great and stuff, and I thought, oh, that's really neat, that's really cool. But then I thought my mom wouldn't let me play with it in the house, and you'd cause an argument about wanting to play. So I went, oh, she'll be mad if I get back. So I walked a little further to figure it out, and there was this beautiful Etch-a-Sketch.
Oh, God.
Probably 5 or 6 times more than the beach ball. So I thought, oh, that would be really fun. So when I got back to Mom, she was like, why did you pick one of the most expensive toys? And I said, but I really wanted a beach ball. But they were very kind and good people, and I worked there as a sodager when I was about 13 to 14 and then to 17, I think. And they were the best people, they were very kind and good to us, and I learned so much doing that job. And then another part of this was the cash register where the ice cream and everything was made. It put in the total, but it didn't add. The calculator at the back, like pharmacy, was a calculator, it added. So when people would come in and often they, have something to eat and go get stuff and bring it back or whatever, we had scrap paper on a clipboard, and we had to write everything down and add each thing to give them the total, to put the total in the cash register when they paid. And I learned more about how to do quick math, really accurate math. So it was really neat to learn that. I think every kid should
Oh, my Lord.
work at something like that because it teaches you many more things than just being there. And that was how to be people, how to talk to people and stuff like that. So that's my memory for
It's good.
the pharmacy.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that was where First Bagels, maybe, if I'm right, the bakers brought First Bagels to New London, where it's on the right side of that.
Yeah.
That might be the case, but before we launch in,
London Deli there, and they
Yeah,
brought
the London
boar's
Deli.
head.
Where the toy
And
store
come to
was.
Vegas.
but before we launch into that, we can't pass over good old Dick Lull that used to work at the. You go in there and he'd be singing his way through the day.
They're right down there.
Yeah, I see it. That's why I remember this. This is great stuff. Yeah. Good old Dick Lull. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He'd whistle his way through.
He'd whistle and Elkins, he whistled and he worked a lot. Yeah. Yeah, and the store changed hands, a small deli in the section, on the left. And then Kiernan's Good Sports, followed by Pedego Electric Bike Shop. And then once the pharmacy went out of business, I see that Alley Oops was there, and they've now relocated into the building just downstream of the library on the same side of the road. Yeah. Also, a what?
A hair place, yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah. Okay, that's a very fair representation of the building. It looks pretty much the same. Ah, how can we forget this? David, is that?
Well, that's where the first bus stop that I remember.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Vermont Trailways. Vermont Transit would stop there. Right. Yeah, and when I was going to college in Boston, I could just walk, go down to not South Station. I can't remember the streets, right at the edge of the Common. And you get on a bus, and you could get off right in the middle of New London. Boy, was that like walk home. It was slick. Yeah, it was great. That really put New London on the map for a while. Now this, ooh, wow, now this is good. I didn't realize that Edmonds Bus Line and service for their buses was located here. That must have been before I had cognition, because I always remember them on down at the end of Old Main Street.
Ernie and I had the apartment over the old post office.
Yeah.
And the buses were parked on that side. And when our daughter was born, I used to take her down and put her on the sidewalk. You could do that in those days. But we had a big old newfie, and the newfie would also go down there. But one morning, somebody laid on the horn, and it got stuck.
Oh, jeez.
Needless to say, everybody was up, and the bus, and Eddie Edmonds had it in those days.
Yeah.
And who else was there?
Well, there was Eddie, and then of course he had Kathy drove, George drove, my mother drove for taxis in the summer. Red Martin. Yeah. Yeah. And then Woody bought the business, and off they went. Yeah. Yeah, that was. No. No, and for those of you, it mentions also in here, Hayward's bought it, ran it as a filling station, and then Daryl Palmer, God rest his soul, I just read his obituary in the paper. There's some stories there too, some of which I'm not sure I want to do in this kind of setting, but there were some great stories there. Pete, you've got...
I've got another one, to go back to that. So, you can see how close these pumps are to the front window. Well, that, when it was the Texaco station, when I remember, we were living on down by the country club, and we got a fire call, and so I came up in my truck, going probably a little too fast. And Donnie Crystal, who used to spend a lot of time at the pharmacy, well, he had a little frost or something on the back of his window, and I don't think he could turn around very well anyway. Well, I was wailing right along, coming down in front of the police station, and he decided that he was going to back out and hope that nobody was coming. So, well, I had a decision to make. It was either hit him broadside or go around him. So I came in through here with my truck, get it all the way through, and then back out, and I kept going to the fire. So I don't know whether Pete, you were chief then, or my dad, but Walt Rainey was chief of police, and so after the call, he came and got me, and he said, do you know what happened? And I said, yeah, Donnie Crystal backed out without looking, and I was headed to the fire. And so I made it fine, and happened to be that was a plate glass window there in front of the garage, and a guy named Al Kerwin used to spend a lot of time up there chewing the fat with Daryl. And he saw me come through, and he told Walt about it. And of course, then we had a little talking. And Al said, if it wasn't Pete Larson that had done that, he said nobody would have been able to make that turn. He said, I got away with it.
Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
You asked Woody to tell us a little bit.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the bus station, the acquisition, and the history, and what happened?
Yeah.
Well, as the Texaco station was where Eddie Edmonds had the business. And then, I think it was, Janice, you can tell me, it was 1957 or 58, Janice Wallace's husband, Bob Wallace, bought Edmonds Bus Line. And what did he call it? He called it New London Transportation. And he built what became the New London Cleaners Building down at the other end of town and moved the bus garage down there. And Bob decided after a year or two that he really wasn't that enamored with the bus business, I think, and sold it back to Eddie Edmonds, at which point Eddie had obviously gotten out of the Texaco station, and so Eddie moved it over to his family place over by, on Old Main Street across from the cemetery. And that's where I bought it in 1967.
I had no idea about that, because Eddie had an Esso station where Heath and Lull started out, but it's now Billy Barton's insurance business. That was his Esso station across from Spring Ledge. There's pictures of that in the Mirror to America. Yeah. And then Bob Lull moved it down there. But yeah, this is all great. I'm sorry?
Were you a bus driver, Woody?
I started driving for Eddie Edmonds when I was in college. And then I drove school routes, and then in the summer we did camp work. And I was only 22 when I bought it, so I was pretty young.
It turned out all right.
Nice for you.
Long on brawn and short on brain, I think is the best way to put it.
One last story of the Texaco station. I remember my brother telling me this story. He worked for Darrell Palmer for a while, pumping gas and spinning wrench and so on and so forth. And there was a wrecker call one winter night about 2 in the morning. And my brother and Darrell went out and retrieved this car, brought it back to the shop, and put it inside. And they're standing there telling a few stories, and there's this blizzard going on about 2 o'clock in the morning, and down the main street comes this state plow, and with the wing down. And the operator of the vehicle, who wishes at this point to remain nameless, was standing out. So now those trucks, those state trucks, had a manual throttle, and it was on the dash, and you turned the knob, and it kept increasing the RPM of the engine, but it would be fixed at some particular point. And if you had that knob set, the truck would drive itself. It's not like you took your foot off the accelerator and it stopped. The manual throttle kept the engine open, kept the engine RPMs up, so you could keep moving. So sure enough, down the main street this truck comes, and there's the operator standing outside the cab on the running board with the door closed and his hand on the steering wheel right down the main street, waving to the guys at the Texaco station at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of a blizzard. And my brother's looking at Darrell, and Darrell's looking at him. Well, did you see that guy? Yeah, we're not going to say who it was. That's not important. It's just that they kind of, oh, wow, because hard enough to drive one of those trucks in a blizzard with the wing down when you're not standing on the running board. But anyway, another stories for another day. Okay, this building. Who recognizes this building and can tell me what it originally was? That was the New London Post Office. Yep, that's where the whole thing began. Old wooden floor, creaky wooden hardwood floors when you walked in there, and that's where you jawed with everybody. And that's where the Boys Club got its start, because back then, in the summertime, people that came here for the summer had their mail just left to general delivery, and they had to go to the post office to pick it up. So all the summer people would congregate by the window waiting to pick up their mail. And that's how Billy Bell and all his buddies who moved up here for the summer got to know one another as a part of a little clique. And they said, this is kind of great, but we want to meet some local people. So why don't we form this little boys club? So that's where the boys club got started, was they invited people who lived here year-round to have a party with those people who just came here for the summer. And that was the start of the Boys Club. And it all began right in the lobby of this old post office building now. And I think the window is right about where the counter is now if you go into grounds, that's where the counter is, about where it was. I took a few walls down, but yeah. And Ernie and Bea lived up over there in the apartment when they first came to New London.
And I'll have to tell you, it was the quietest place in the morning, especially about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, because they started the canceling machine.
The canceling machine?
And I'll never forget, Glenn asked me one morning when I went down for the mail, did we wake you up this morning?
That was Clem Lovering? Clem Lovering, yeah. And then Dean, Victor Dean. Victor and Charlotte Pitts Dean, yeah. He was a postmaster for years. And of course, out behind this building was Shepherd's Stable. That's now the maintenance area for the college. But that was Shepherd's Stable. That's where you went if you wanted to rent a horse, or that's where the stagecoach departed from. And the Shepherd boys ran that stable for years.
David, Michael,
Yes.
go back a minute.
Yep.
I don't know if anybody remembers what that became after Victor and Charles Fish moved out as a post office.
Oh, wait.
Pizza shop?
Pizza.
No, pizza,
Bernie Malloy.
Bernie Malloy's Pizza. Well, don't forget, Dr. James B. Brown and his dentist's office was on the wing, remember? Dr. James B.
Tractor travel, home decor.
Yep. Says here, let me read this narrative. I don't want to this is hard work that was put together to make this narrative, and I don't want to slight it, so I'm going to read what it says here. New London Post Office, Dr. Brown's dental practice in the section to the left of the photo. He was well known to say to his patients, "Open Biggie Big." How many of you guys remember? I remember that. Oh yeah, Open Biggie Big. Yep. Dead River Fuel had an office in there. Main section was once Bernie's Pizza, and then C.B. Coburn's clothing store. So it's had a storied past. Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
So Charlotte Dean, the wife of the postmaster, also did the local column.
Oh, she did. Oh my God. Oh, she did. And they had this yellow Mustang convertible. And they were both they were both very big people. And they had a hard time getting in and out of vehicles, and it helped when there wasn't any top, because they were just big people. Big-hearted, big people. Yeah. And they drive right down with the convertible with the snow and whatever. Yeah. So in the middle of the winter, yeah. Great. Okay, what do we got here? Caldwell Banker. Residence. Alan Edminster? Whose residence was it?
It was too far.
Was it Edminster's residence? Remember Alan W. Edminster, the photographer? Yeah, he used to shoot, when I was a kid shooting pictures, he was always there shooting pictures. He paid. I thought that was his house. And then it was bought and renovated, and they added on that wraparound porch that's closed in. It kind of looks like a wraparound porch that's closed in.
It was Church's.
Churches came later. Yeah. I don't know. It's all off. The whole building is offices now, yes? Yeah. Any other observations about this one? Okay. Oh, I remember this place. This was Dr. William P. Clough Jr. residence, yes? And he had his medical office in here, and I can remember going in there, and as a young kid, my mother would lead us in the side doors to the right. You went into the thing, and you could smell the chloroform or the ether whenever you walked in the doctor's office. They had all these little rooms in there. And the nurse was, the little redhead that drove the Porsche. No, she lives over on Page Road and raises dogs. What's her name? Had a license plate, Nail.
Yeah.
That's it, Ruthie Cave. Yeah.
She wasn't a nurse though, but she was his secretary.
Yeah, I vividly remember her. Yeah, as a kid.
Yeah, she lives worked next door. Yeah.
Rachel Sargent worked for him.
Okay.
Down at the bottom of the road where the strawberry farm is now.
Right, correct. Sargent's, which is house. The house is gone. The barn remains. Yeah. Yeah. Rachel Sargent. Rachel and Murray Sargent. Oh, he brought this tractor thing up to the garage when I was a kid. This homemade tractor And I remember Bill telling me about this thing. I don't know where it went. But the front end had knee action front end suspension. It was very unique. It not like anything else I'd ever seen. And because each front worked independently, a knee action front end. And Bill was looking at that thing and he told me, yeah, that was a poor design. He says, that killed more people. You can imagine. I don't know what happened to that. But back then, people made their farm tractors from old jalopies. They took truck rear ends out and put them on behind, bolted them to the frame, and they made their own tractors because they were so expensive to buy them new. And they had the know-how to do it. Okay, New London Inn. Oh boy, what do we got here? In 1870, this farmhouse was bought by Herman J. Currier, who turned it into the property into a hotel called the Elms. Well, back then they had elms on Main Street in some places. Yeah. He added the third story and the hip roof. The inn returned to the Sargent family in 1895 when Walter P. Sargent, grandson of Ezekiel's brother John, bought the inn and named it the Hotel Sargent. From 1903 to 1904, Harry Nichols became an investment partner and more additions were made to the inn. Several managers were in charge, including Charles Shepard, whom we've heard before, who ran the stagecoach route in the area. D.L. LePierre advertised steam-heated rooms. Next came Hugh McKinnon, who in 1916 advertised 50 rooms, dining for 90, an open-air cafe, and chauffeur quarters. He installed electric lighting fixtures in the inn, and prior to the electric lighting, they had gas lights, acetylene gas lights, as I recall, and they had to have a plant that made the acetylene gas, and then they ducted it to various places. And the remnants of the acetylene gas production plant, the foundation stones, are right by the corner of the town office, right at the edge of the New London Green. There's various collections of cut pieces of granite which form the foundation of the acetylene plant that produced acetylene for these early gas lamps before they went to electric. For the period between 1918 and 1939, the inn was owned by Colby Academy, now Colby Sawyer College. Frank Gay managed the inn for 10 years. In 1929, Colby leased the inn to Wendell and Clara Hobbs. Now, we're going to stop there because I know I did see Howard Hoke someplace.
Yep.
Yeah, you got a little story on that related to some cards at the appropriate time, Howard. You just raise your hand and I'll have you chime in that story. Clara Hobbs, who ran the Sunapee Lodge on Lake Sunapee. The Hobbs eventually purchased the inn from Colby in 1939, and there were some certain residence deals made. I don't know if we're going to get into that. The Sargent family once again became part of the New London Inn's history when in 1941, Calvin Sargent, great-grandson of Ezekiel Sargent, entered into a contract with Wendell Hobbs for a room, heat, bath, meals, and hotel service for the rest of his life, or as long as Hobbs owned the inn, for $5,000. He was 73 at the time. Contract came to an end in 1967 when the inn was sold to Frank and Lois Conklin. Calvin Sargent eventually outlived Hobbs and passed away just after his 100th birthday. Now, the question is, who got the better deal there? The inn has had many owners over the years. Some of them are sitting in this room, as I understand. Edith Currier, Herman Currier's great-granddaughter, is in attendance here. Herman, yes? Yes? Do you want to add anything to this dissertation? By all means, here, take this.
Tell us anything you'd like to tell us that you remember.
Okay, so when I was growing up, I always heard that my grandfather was born at the New London Inn, and I never could really figure it out. So finally investigated it. Some of my family members had passed, and when I met Ben, he went back into his family history books, Bible, and said in the 1890, I'm not sure exactly what year, 1896 or whatever, my great-grandfather is Herman Currier, and my grandfather is Moody Currier. He was born there. He was born at the inn He was named, I believe, after Moody Courier, who is currently the governor of New Hampshire. And my great-grandfather turned it into an inn and put the 3rd floor on. So then it was called the Elms at the time, right? I think, Ben?
First one to run it as an inn.
Is my great-grandfather. So my great-grandfather was Herman Courier, and he was also a photographer. And in a lot of the New London history, there's a lot of slides by Herman Courier with a lot of the glass negatives. So I have some, that was my great-grandfather's inn in the that turned it into an inn. So that was kind of fun.
Thank you so much. That's very nice of you. Thank you. And as a kid in grade school, I remember Jim Granger, Clarence Granger, got the job of renovating the inn. And he had this guy working for him named Morris Reno, lived down Wilmot Flat. Morris was a trickster. Oh, he was a character. And they put the lift, they put the L, the shed dormer on the back of our house. And I can remember as a kid, those boys up there banging away. That's how I got to know Morris. So anyway, I get out of school, and the first thing we did was we'd go up to the drugstore and we'd buy a bunch of balloons, and we'd find a silcock someplace, and we'd fill them up, make water balloons. And the boys were up on the 2nd floor balcony banging away. And so we let fly with a bunch of water balloons in the summer, trying to hit these guys and get them all wet. And good old Morris just caught it when it bounced off the wall and threw it back to me. Yeah, this is all good stuff. Anyway, kids just raising hell, you know.
There are the elm trees.
There are the elm trees, which Dutch elm disease, I'm sure, claimed them. They were very prolific tree in all of the United States at one time, and then the Dutch elm disease came and decimated them. I see Howard Hoke in the back. Do you want a microphone, Howard? You want to just tell us what you got to...
I think there's one right here.
There you go.
You just tell me when to stop.
Mr. Hobbs and Mr. Graves used to like to play cribbage at night, and I, if I was quiet, would be allowed to sit and watch.
And how old were you at this time?
Like I remember, 8, 9. They did not like having children around when they were playing cribbage. But ultimately, I was good enough, and they both taught me how to play cribbage, which I enjoy playing with Michael from time to time these days.
Never for money.
No. Another thing that occurred is we were there at New Year's often, and Edna Graves had a way of finding us young men, and I can't speak for my brothers, but I can speak for myself. I did not want to receive a hug from Edna because my head was about breast height, and she had some of the largest breasts of anybody I ever knew. And she wouldn't let go. And a final note is there was a chaise lounge on the 2nd floor. If you go up the first set of stairs and come around to the landing, there was a chaise lounge there. I'm very happy to say that it is in my bedroom right now.
Oh, very cool. Thank you, Howard. That's good stuff. Any other, Dan, you own the building. Do you want to make any comments about its historical renovation? They did some work when you were there. Anything to add? Don't mean to put you on the spot.
I guess, when was it? 2002? Something like that. I took it over after a couple of owners. There were 3 or 4 owners in a short period of time, and it was a great place to run, and really enjoyed it and miss it. And then COVID came and got the better of me on that thing. So it's a great place, and I hope you all go in. We had a little snack tonight before we came down here, so I'll give those guys credit. They're doing a heck of a good job.
Yeah, it's a landmark. It really is. I'm so glad it's been preserved and still here. And now, we have to talk about the businesses underneath it. As a kid, I fondly remember my neighbor and his wife, Clarence Lull, and his wife, Barbara. Barbara ran the beauty shop, Silhouette Beauty Shop, and then he had the barber shop out front. Now, as a young man, I never had occasion to patronize the barber shop, but I always watched everybody that went in and out of there. I mean, I just had no business in there. I don't know if my brother went in there or not, but, you know, it was kind of a curious place, all these guys going in and out of there all the time. Yeah, they were a character. They lived down the road from me, right next to the cemetery. And every spring, they'd call up Mort DeBar, who ran the chicken farm over there on Tracy Road, and they'd get a load of hen shit, and they'd spread it all over his lawn. And we had this little border collie pup. And back then, you know, you didn't have fencing areas for your dogs. You know, people trained their dogs to stay around their houses. Well, to my little border collie pup, that fresh hen manure was just irresistible, and that dog would go down on his lawn and roll in it, and then come back to the house. Yeah, it was. Yeah, Clarence and Barbara were great neighbors. They really were. Ran that beauty shop for years, and then Lenny Feenstra was in there for a while, wasn't he? He had a barber shop in there. Yeah. Anybody? Anything else? Anybody else?
Yeah, well, Lenny came from Newport, and he worked with when we were living in Newport, we used to go over and have Lenny do it, and I actually got probably a little better value than you got, Mike. It was 85 cents to get my hair cut with Lenny Feenstra, and he knew one stroke, just right around.
Yeah.
Mike, wasn't that Phil Cross?
Phil Cross was in there too, yes. Thank you. Yep, he was in there for a while. Thank you. Yep.
No, Lenny was at
Down there, yeah, okay. Yeah, now I'm confused.
Was it Mike?
Yeah, shoot. They did. They did have it that, I don't remember, it was art and paintings and that kind of thing?
Gift shop.
Gift shop, yep.
There have been a couple of antique shops in there. Calico Cat started there. And my mother-in-law sold antiques.
I got my first haircut in there, and they had a struggle trying to keep me in the chair. I think today I'd probably fall asleep.
This is another one that the fire department burned down.
Oh, no, this is Betty Nichols' beauty shop. Mary Wright's old place. Betty Nichols. And I would like to mention that J. Dwayne Squires thought the front door of Betty Nichols' beauty shop building was worthy of print photograph as documented evidence of architectural merit in the town of New London, and it ended up in an ash pile. Which is why some have advocated that we have a demolition ordinance in the town which says that if you intend to destroy a building, you must give notice, post it to the public, and have a 60-day stay before, which gives people an opportunity to decide whether or not something should be saved, and it can be saved properly. Perhaps it can be moved. There's been several buildings, including the Historical Society building, another building down on the way to the brew pub on the right, a nice cape. Those were moved there from elsewhere, and as a result were preserved. And if we had a demolition ordinance, we might be able to avail ourselves of that opportunity for some other buildings before they come down.
So this building in the back barn, this is the vacant lot now, but in the back barn, we lived in there 40 years ago.
There was an apartment in the back.
There was an apartment upstairs in the back. And, but in the barn off the back, there were splotches all over the back wall, which is because the National Survival Games paintball folks started their headquarters in there, and they practiced the paintballs on that back wall.
Too funny.
And Oscar Colby used to sleep up on the hay bale.
I was going to say, yeah. Oscar Colby was an interesting.
And New London Trust started their first daycare in that building, and Debbie Sias is the one that pulled it together.
I don't know if Debbie's here now or not.
Well, she's not Debbie Sias anymore, but she was.
Hey, Deb, how are you? This is a very familiar site. Do you all remember what this began as? It was a First National store at one point. It was also the Market Basket. And then this was the initial offices of the New London Trust Company, which several prominent town members decided it was time New London had a bank. And so they went door to door selling shares of stock to start the New London Trust Company. And it began in the right-hand half of this building. And the left-hand half was still the market, as I recall, yeah? The Market Basket went out, but it was a First National supermarket.
Was there a restaurant there too?
The Market Basket was the...
Was the restaurant.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And it's
like a lunch counter.
But then it was Jiffy Mart.
And then, there was a Jiffy Mart. That's right.
It was the left side.
I'm not... No, wait a minute, Ben. Hold it. I don't see the Jiffy Mart in there, dude. Come on. Jiffy Mart, 2 words. Come on, dude. Yeah, okay. Jiffy Mart. Jiffy Mart, and that was an expansion of their Claremont operation. Yeah.
What was his name, Mike?
Oh, I can see him.
Paul Gagne.
Paul Gagne. Gagne. Sorry, my French is not what it should be. He was a character. Oh, my Lord. Okay. What do we got here?
Opening a new London Trust.
The opening, and of course, when was this? What year? Is that? Back that up? Yeah, that was the year I was 4 years old. My mother decided it was time to get a job out of the house, and so she started in as a teller there, and it didn't work out. So she came back home. But on that story, I just, if I may, I don't know if I told you this story before when we had that other outing 2 years ago. But there was a great feeling of community in the town of New London back then. When my mother moved here and got married, there was only 600 hardy souls that lived here in the winter in 1944, about 49 when they got married. And then shortly after that, my brother came along, and then 3 years later, I came along. And I remember my mother telling me this story. They were living in that house I live in now on Old Main Street. And next door was where Robin grew up as a kid, but there wasn't anyone living in that house in the winter. Yeah, there was only the Lauridsen's on top of Knights Hill, and I don't think there was that many other people. There was no other houses around. So you learned, as my mother said, you learned who your neighbors were, who you could call. They had a lot of party lines in town. The phone system wasn't as robust as it is today. Anyway, in the middle of the winter, my mother was giving me a bath, I don't remember, and my brother, who was 4, put on his winter clothes and took the English setter dog, Freckles, and said, "Mommy, I'm going out. Take a walk." And my mother's like, she's busy with me. She said, "Okay, fine." So she finished up with me, and she went out, and she couldn't see my brother. She called and called and called, and all she saw was 2 sets of tracks headed for where you lived. Well, I mean, she couldn't leave me, and so she panicked, basically. Called my father. He was working down at the Bob Buzzell's Rope Tow down on Bunker Road, which that was the first rope tow that we had in town. 2 rope tows, and my father was down there working. And said, "Andy's gone. The dog, I don't know where he went. I can't go looking for him." And it was in the middle of the winter. There was 1.5 to 2 feet of snow. So Bud Lauridsen got the Colby girls class of skiers that he had, and they got him on a bus, and they brought him back up to Old Main Street, and they started this massive search party. And my father, she got a hold of my father somehow. Yeah, he was down at the rope tow. He came up. He followed the tracks, and everybody else, did this sweep. And my brother and that dog went down Old Main Street, down over the cliffs to Clark Pond, and back out to the bog road. And my brother and my father caught up with them just before they got to the bog road. And it was, what I always remember about that is the great turnout of you just got people, and they all pitched in to help, because that's the kind of place New London was in 1950. And it was really a fascinating story. Thank God it ended up with a happy ending. It could have been turned up so worse. But yeah, did you want to?
Just going to say, the Market Basket restaurant that was there, there's a menu over there.
Oh, okay, thank you. On the table?
Restaurant, yeah.
Hey, do we have?
And I think, and you might remember this, wasn't there a fire in there, and that's when?
The original building from the late 1800s burned on Hospital Day, 1948.
Wow.
And the current building. What? So can you be more specific? So the current building was built after that and added on.
Right. But I thought there was a fire after the restaurant was there, but I'm not sure of that. I think, I remember seeing something about they did get the cash register out with the money.
There might have been.
Yeah, but anyways, there's a restaurant, there's a menu over there. Interesting to look at the prices.
Yeah.
And we serve Crockett's ice cream.
Oh, very cool.
And I remember people would not believe it was from Crockett's. And the funny thing is, when we ran out, we would go down to Crockett's to bring more.
Great reminiscence.
It seemed the same as if it was great outside.
So this is a building that's very dear to my mind, Kidder Garage. That was the first automobile dealership in the town of New London. And it's started by William M. Kidder, and then taken over by William F. Kidder, and then David H. Kidder. And then they rented office space upstairs, which was used to store parts and so on and so forth. I spent almost 10 years there working, pumping gas in the summer. And of course, the town clerk office was in the front because William F. Kidder Sr. was the town clerk. And then Mary D. Haddad worked for him, and she did a lot of the kind of things that Will Kidder does today, although things were a lot simpler back then. And that very fond memories. It kind of was the center of town. And the post office was just up the street. And you had to make that corner, and Mary kind of sat in the corner windows there and watched everything that happened. And it really was, and it was really kind of, and the bank right across the street. I can remember old Bill Kidder saying on Sunday in the summer when I was working there, he used to say to me, that's Lieutenant Colonel Kidder, retired, United States Army, went to the Rhine with General Patton. And he'd just say, Mike, get your broom and your dustpan, meet me over in front of the bank. And the choice of pronoun kind of stuck with me. It was kind of like, those are yours. You own those tools. They belong to you, and you know that was a certain attachment that was created there, which was supposed to create an esprit de corps, you know. And so that's. I'm very privileged in some ways to have worked for him because I learned a lot, and it helped me on further in life.
What do you know about the bowling alley that was?
That's down the street. That was started by the Sharkies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually we kind of.
Jiffy Mart went in here. Jiffy Mart went in here, right?
The Jiffy Mart moved over there when the garage ceased operation and they began renting office space and elsewhere, renovating the wash bay and the grease bay. Then the Jiffy Mart moved over there when the bank expanded. Correct. That's exactly.
Get down to the bowling alley.
Yeah. Now we did do some spur trips here, but we kind of confined ourselves to the main street. But I don't want to say that there weren't other businesses elsewhere that have an equally flowering history, colorful history as these do. This was the original telephone company building, a block building. That's where all the telephone switches were originally before they moved down to Art Little's garage, which we're going to get to in a minute. There was an old switchboard in there, yes, and which is in the next bay over here, as I recall. The original switchboard is over here. Yeah. Yeah. And this was the Country Press. Country Press Kearsarge Shopper. This was Peterson, right? Yeah. There was a little story about Larry Peterson's daughter and Kidder Point, but we're going to skip that for now. Anyway, we'll just go straight to this. And there's the bowling alley, which is now the Country Press Kearsarge Shopper. Yep. Was there?
Yeah, I don't know if it was the bowling alley or right next to it. But yeah.
Well, opposite that was the old site of the old firehouse. I don't know if you have a picture of that. Did Jim send us a picture of that? But that's where the fire department was right behind Kidder Garage. You can still see that parking lot. There's a little elevated rectangular place you can park now. That's the foundation of the original fire department. I remember that when I was a kid.
Wasn't there a laundromat down there too?
There was a laundromat. Yep, I can remember playing chess after school. That was was one of the Spaldings. Stu Spalding owned that. Yeah. And then the second New London Post Office, and I can remember as a kid, the guy that bought that, Gilman was the name of him. He built post offices all over the place. That was his thing. He got the government contract to build the post offices, or he arranged to do this. And they dumped a whole bunch of fill down there one hospital day weekend, and he paid me to go down there and keep moving the hose from pile to pile because they had to make sure that it had enough moisture in it that they could tamp it before they poured the concrete. So that was my job, to run down there and move the hose.
So your sheet will say that this is the Council on Aging, but this is where the laundromat was.
Oh, the gutter business. Country Press, Canary, New London Post Office after Main Street, yes. Council on Aging, site of Busy Bee's Laundry, late 1950s, bingo. Yep, now we skip over to a gift of the generous Mrs. Tracy. This was not originally a library. My recollection was it was a hospital, was it not? Residence, then New London Hospital, 1918 to 1923. Reconstructed and became the Tracy Memorial Library in 1926. And this is one of the few slate roof buildings in town. The entire Tracy farm on Tracy Road is a slate roof. You could count the number of slate roofs in the town in London, and they're all still there. They're a lifetime roof if they're properly cared for. And that slate had to come from Vermont, someplace, Poultney, Pollitt, somewhere over by Rutland. That's where the great slate quarries are. Yeah. But back then, that was considerable. You had to have considerable money, and not only that, but the infrastructure of the building itself must be constructed in a way that it can support the weight of the slates, more so than asphalt shingles or metal. Yep. What do we got here? Oh, C.W. Lee Lawyers and Hager Investments. Residents previously. Yep. Shoot.
It's 8:30, I just wanted.
Well, so it's time. We're at 25, and there's a total of 70 properties on this list. So I think what we might want to do is leave off here with the appropriate.
If we could just go down the street a little more. Eddie Dexter Jewelry Shop, because his daughter's there.
Oh, okay, yeah. We're going to jump to Dunkin' Donuts. 33. For those of you in your hymnals, it's number 33. Let's jump to 33. Okay, so when I was a kid, this was the really cool place to be, not because of the jewelry store, but because of the candy store. And the cool part was you can see right out here is the school. So you didn't have to go that far to get to the candy store. This is one of the benefits of a neighborhood school, but we're not going to go there. I think we ought to build a new elementary school in Sutton and truck everybody down there. No, I didn't say that. You didn't hear that from me. Okay. But when I was a kid, we were privileged enough to have the New London Central School right behind, and when you got out from school, you could walk and go to the favorite candy store. It was really, really cool. So where is one of the Dexter girls? Is it Nancy Dexter? Did you want, your mom and dad ran that place and you grew up there. Did you want to take the microphone and tell us anything you'd like to tell us about what it was like to live there?
I'm Audrey Dexter Martell now.
Okay.
And a lot of people remember the candy store because when the kids got out of school, the bus driver would purposely wait a few minutes. The kids would run across the field because my mom sold penny candy in there, and she would be running around like crazy so that everybody could go back and get on the school bus.
A little latitude for the local business, you know, and all the kids, and I'm sure the dentists appreciated that because they're the ones that reap the downstream benefits of that whole scene. But yeah.
Then as far as the jewelry store, my dad used to get all the Colby girls down there because they weren't allowed to have cars at Colby Sawyer. So all the girls would walk down and do the jewelry thing. And my grandfather, who lived on Little Sunapee, every morning he raised sweet pea flowers. And every morning he'd get in his old green truck, which we still have, and he would drive down and leave a coffee can full of sweet peas, bunches of them. He tied them up with a rubber band, and Nan and I would sit out front and sell them for 25 cents a bunch. And you did. Yep. Then the other thing that we sold raspberries also. My dad would go down in our field and pick raspberries, but Nan and I also would sell rocks out front to my dad's customers. And then the customers would go next door to Mr. Doyley's hardware store, the Doyley girls here, and their dad would say, "Boy, that's a pretty good-looking rock you got there. Where'd you get that?" And they'd say, "Well, it cost me quite a bit of money next door at Dexter's." And Nan and I would tell them we got them from Ruggles Mine.
Great stories. Yeah. Do we want to? You have something to add?
Yeah, I would like to draw a parallel between the school out back and the candy store, and my grandmother lived above the hardware store, because one day Mr. Livingston, the principal, called my mother because he was very much into the care and keeping of the children at the school and wanted to know if she needed financial assistance because Susie wasn't eating. She would bring her 25 cents and then she would leave school and she would spend it at her friend Nancy's mother's candy store. And it was all about Nancy because we used to walk to school together every morning. So I thought I was doing my due diligence. So thank you very much.
What a great story. And as long as we're in that neighborhood, then I suppose, since I see that is Hilda in the darkness, is it not?
Yes.
It is. Okay, Hilda, would you like to tell us a little bit about your father's, and I think your grandmother lived upstairs. Was that her? I don't. Anyway, your father had a hardware store in that structure as I was a kid. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, they did. This is my sister Susie, and I am the oldest. She's not. Just so you know. So, yeah, she's older. So anyway, my dad owned that hardware store for 35 years, and you know, lots of good times, lots of good stories. Audrey and Nancy obviously had their parents' business next to us, and we'd walk to school behind there. Lots of fun stories. Some are good to tell, some are not. So. Yes, cardboard boxes, and it was good. And then Marion Hafner lived down the street, Marion Chadwick, I'm sure a lot of you know her. And as my dad used to say when Marion walked by, keep on walking, Marion, I'm not ready yet. So lots of fun stuff.
Lots of good stuff.
You know, I recently had the opportunity to run into Campbell, Gavin Campbell, and he told me a really heartwarming story about my dad. He said that your dad hired me to work at the store, and I was getting my license, and he would still pay me and allow me to go behind and take my driver ed class for an hour and a half and then come back to the store and finish his working. And we grew up many years with the Campbell Merrigan family living next door to us on Barrett Road.
Which was the old, next to the old Crossroads of Sports. Yeah, we all had some nicknames we probably shouldn't repeat here.
Well,
I wish we could continue. Is there anyone else who is a descendant of the business owners downstream of the former Dorley's hardware store? If you have come a long distance to be here, I don't want to miss the opportunity to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, in lieu of that, we'll have to have another session and continue our journey down the remainder of the main street. I think it's fascinating, and if we have time, we should explore some of the little byways and highways off the main street that also have businesses that are not included in this initial presentation. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I want to once again thank Ben Cochran for all his hard work on this. And to Jim Perkins for scouring through the archives and producing these other photographs, which we've seen several of tonight. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. Thank you all for coming. This has been a great reminiscence.
We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy, so we show them how, and we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect. That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids need to know the dangers and how to avoid them. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids, because when you talk, they hear you.
Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
If any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you. For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
The Lake Sunapee region is one of the few communities in the country where you can ski year-round. During the summer season, the lake provides water skiing, fishing, swimming, and boating. During the winter, Mount Sunapee Resort, located at the south end of the lake, is one of the most popular ski and snowboard destinations in New Hampshire. The views of Lake Sunapee from the trails in Sun Bowl are spectacular. For more information about visiting our beautiful area, contact the Lake Sunapee Region Chamber of Commerce.